And we turn now to the deadly shootings of a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband this past weekend. They are shining a renewed spotlight on the need for online privacy laws. Now, this after authorities revealed that the alleged gunman in those Minnesota slayings used a host of various people finder websites to find personal information, potentially including the home addresses of his would-be victims. Now, some of these sites you've likely heard of, such as White Pages and Been Verified, and there are countless sites like them. Officials say the alleged shooter used 11 sites in total. Here with us now to discuss is the director of information security consulting firm Trusted Sec, Alex Hammerstone. Alex, thank you so much for hopping on the call to discuss this. So I want to talk more about these sites, but first, what was really eye-opening to me about this case is reportedly both of these lawmakers who were targeted, Hortman and Hoffman, they published their home addresses on their campaign and legislative websites. How common is that? How much of a threat do you think that poses to lawmakers specifically?
So it's extremely common. It's very easy in this day and age to find out someone's address. So much of it is public record. In most states, you can go online to a county or parish website and do a quick search and find out where someone lives. Voter records are generally public as well. So this information is already out floating around. I think what one of the biggest differences is when I was younger, you had phone books hanging on every public phone, and you go look up someone's address that way. Or if you wanted public records, you had to physically go to the office, the county office or the government office, and look it up. But now all these things are available with a quick search.
Right. And a small fee in some cases. So there's now this act called the Delete Act. It's being proposed by several lawmakers, which would allow Americans to submit a single request to the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, to have their private information removed from the databases of every registered data broker. What are your thoughts on that being one arm of a solution here?
So I'm all for anything that gives people more, rights around their data, more privacy, really more insight into what's happening with their data. But the challenge is I always like to look at what is the outcome you're seeking with this. And the problem is that a lot of these sites are just aggregating other public data. And a lot of this data is required to be public, right? So things like, mortgage information and, taxpayer information and things like that. So even if you are able to kind of get rid of some of these aggregation sites, the data is still out there. And if you look at something like, the unfortunate events that transpired with these lawmakers, someone that's that committed to this type of bad act is not going to be slowed down by a few extra clicks, right? It's one of those things where it might make it a bit more difficult, but also if you look at some of the data that's out there, if you use one of these people search sites to look up someone's address to send a birthday card, a lot of times the information is wrong. So it's not just, removing your data, but it's really making sure the data is, correct.
Yeah, there are a lot of layers to this. I wanted to ask you about something Senator Ron Wyden, this is a Democrat from Oregon, told this he would like to see new regulations on data brokers, saying, quote this, every single American's safety is at risk until Congress cracks down on this sleazy industry. To your point previously, how do you see a mission like that potentially playing out?
So I think it's essential to really, understand that there's multiple types of data brokers, right? There are ones that sell things that we think of as non-public, so things like your shopping history or a lot of this information that's constantly collected about us by marketers and organizations and everything else. Then it's aggregated and sold, and that's very common. I think people will be shocked at how common that is. Versus these aggregation sites that are taking public information and just making it easier for people to find, right? This is all information that somebody could Google or find out another way. So really, I think it's important to look at it that way. I think a lot of these regulations are probably focused, more on the former, where it's kind of that deeper information that's not as readily available. And again, I'm always in favor of anything that helps people manage their own privacy. But the challenge is just so much of this data is already out there and easy to find in other ways.
Right. There have been some similar efforts in the past. Data brokers and other industry groups, they've challenged those attempts, arguing they violate the First Amendment. Do you think we'll see a similar response to any of these initiatives? And do you also see solutions that may be able to satisfy both sides?
So I think we'd never be incorrect if we guessed that organizations and companies are going to fight against, regulations that might hamper their ability to do business. So I certainly think we would see, pushback from these companies. But again, it's as far as kind of tamping down on some of this. Again, it's just very, written into laws and everything else, what has to be available. So even if you get rid of the aggregation, you can still go out to county websites and see where people live. If you think about the other types of information out there, once you have someone's address in this day and age, you can oftentimes see pictures of their house from real estate listings, right? Real estate listing from 10 years ago, might still be floating around. And so I think it's not just the names, the addresses, pieces like that. It's just the plethora of information that's out there about everybody at this point.
Yeah, and if someone's committed to finding it, it's really hard to curtail that. I want to ask you about one other crime, swatting, making a false report to authorities, which leads to headaches or worse for the victims, wasted taxpayer dollars in a lot of cases for the rest of us. This is an issue that has become more prominent in recent years. What do you think can be done or should be done to curtail that type of criminal behavior?
So swatting is absolutely terrifying, and as you're absolutely correct, it's continued to become more common. And I think, it's probably a multifaceted approach to stop it. One is, of course, making sure that we're punishing the perpetrators. I think making sure that, there's some kind of validation, I think, on the law enforcement end, that to make sure that it was a legitimate call is going to be something that people are going to need to focus on. But again, it's tough, just when there's so much data. Anybody, I think the best way to hide these days is having a common name, right? It makes you harder to find. But, it's just not difficult to find anyone's name and address. And again, it's usually, a few seconds to find it. It's not something that takes a day of research. So preventing anything that involves, having known someone's address is going to be difficult. But the swatting is absolutely terrifying. You see the increased news reports about it.
Yeah, well, and it may lead to other security measures being essential if that's the case, and the information's out there already. Alex Hammerstone, thank you for your voice on this.
Thank you.